Welcome to this policy session on March 18, 2025. County Administrator Gary Schmidt.
Chair, your microphone is muted.
Whoops, I am sorry. There we go. We're back on. I'll start over. And welcome to this policy session on March 18, 2025. County Administrator Gary Schmidt, would you please call the roll?
Yes, Chair Roberts. Roll call. Commissioner Savas.
Present.
Commissioner West.
Here.
Commissioner Schrader.
Here.
Chair Roberts.
Here. All right, Gary, thank you. And would you please introduce the first agenda item?
Yes, thank you. Your first and only policy session today is Metro Regional Waste System Facilities Plan Presentation. Our staff from Transportation and Development will kick it off, and we have guests from Metro, which I'll ask you to introduce, Dan. So our staff to start, Dan Johnson, Director of Transportation and Development, and Cheryl Bell, Assistant Director of Transportation and Development.
Good morning, Chair Roberts. You're switching spots. It's really freaking me out. I'm not sure what's going on here. But
Where we're going to put Ben, that's the whole game.
It's where's Ben? But in the interest of time, I'm going to turn it over to Cheryl Bell, who's going to do a quick introduction about the policy session and the information you're going to hear about today. So with that, Cheryl.
So good afternoon, Chair Roberts and Commissioners. We have an informational policy session for you today. Metro has developed a regional system facilities plan that takes a strategic look at the investments needed and capital investments needed to support the garbage, recycling, and reuse infrastructure in the region. This is a 20-year plan, and it's important for Clackamas County because over the lifetime of the plan, it proposes important investments within the county, including changes to the services that are currently provided at Metro South. There are also financial implications over that 20-year span of the plan that'll be implemented through the regional fees that we charge through our franchise hauler program. This is a super brief introduction to a really complicated and important plan, but we're going to turn things over to the team at Metro so they have plenty of time to do their presentation and answer your questions. We have SD Siegel and Marta McGuire here from Metro to present to you. I know that county staff are here if you have questions of us during the presentation.
Thank you.
Dan. Okay, got it.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chair
Good
Roberts,
afternoon.
Commissioners. Thank you so much for having us here today. Again, my name is Dr. Marta McGuire. I'm Metro's Waste Prevention and Environmental Services Department Director, and I have here with me SD Siegel, who is one of our principal planners who has been leading the development of this plan. One of Metro's responsibilities is managing the garbage and recycling system. It's something that you may not hear as much about, so we're excited to have an opportunity today to update you on efforts that we have underway to make improvements to the regional system that includes both public and private facilities. And as mentioned, one of our public transfer stations is located here in Oregon City in your community, Metro South. So if we go to the next slide. Our work in this area is driven by the 2030 Regional Waste Plan that sets goals for managing the region's garbage and recycling system with the key priorities listed here. This plan also meets state requirements for the region to have a waste reduction plan in place, and we implement this plan in partnership with cities and counties in the region. Today, we are here to discuss one of the key priorities of the plan, focusing on ensuring that everyone has access to accessible and affordable services. To address this priority, Metro has developed the Regional System Facilities Plan that takes a holistic view at the waste management system here, addressing longstanding gaps in services. Next slide. So a good example of the state of our system is our Metro South Public Transfer Station. This facility actually opened to the public in 1983, and it was originally designed to host an incinerator. It was expected to handle up to 800 tons of waste every day. Fast forward to today, Metro South processes more than 300,000 tons annually. The challenges to the site are daily. If we go back to the next slide, thank you. And we do our best at operating an overburdened facility in a safe manner. However, to keep high-quality materials out of the landfill, we need to have more space to separate out recyclables, reusable materials, and ensure safety for traffic flow. So if you've ever visited Metro South on a Saturday afternoon to drop off cardboard or to drop off household hazardous waste. It's amazing the work that the crew does to navigate that traffic flow, but you can see that it originally wasn't designed to host both self-haul, what we call self-haul customers, our residents and small businesses dropping things off in their cars or pickup trucks, alongside commercial hauling trucks that are picking up materials. It's just one example of how over the last 40 years, the needs of the region have changed. Garbage and recycling system facility gaps are experienced differently by people throughout the region, and the current distribution of facilities means that some people have easy access to services, such as mattress recycling or household hazardous waste, but others do not. So if we go to the next slide, we also know that we live in a place where people care about the environment and are willing to spend more time and effort to keep valuable resources out of the landfill. So here is a picture of a local recycling event hosted by James Recycling. People waited more than half an hour to recycle items that cannot be collected at the curb, and this happened just this past September, and paid $3 a bag. This is just one example of the values of our region in practice. Next slide. To address the aging system, Metro Council directed us to complete a system facilities plan to take a holistic view at the region's facilities to identify investments needed to improve access to facilities and services for everyone. This plan is a 20-year vision, as mentioned, and provides a roadmap for future investment. It's a vision document that identifies facility and program investments for the region to pursue, essentially a blueprint to set direction. And any proposed investment will have many decision points along the way and points of refinement before full implementation. It also calls out areas that need more study. Next slide. So we've been working on this plan a while. Over the last 2 years, Metro engaged with local governments, industry, community, and tribal governments across the region, hosted an international symposium, and engaged with Metro Council to develop the set of investments that are included in the plan before you. Each phase of the plan essentially focused on building a chapter through an iterative process, starting with the values and outcomes. And so this slide shows the many touch points that we've had across plan development. The Metro Policy Advisory Committee that has had Clackamas County representation on it was involved in each phase of plan development. We also had the opportunity to engage the Clackamas Coordinating Committee in the development of the plan. And we are now in the final phase of plan adoption. So today we want to give you a brief overview of the investment strategy and financing approach, and I will turn it over to Esty.
Thanks, Marta, and hello, counselors, commissioners. My name is Esty Siegel, she, her pronouns, and I am a principal planner with Metro's Waste Prevention Environmental Services Department. So I'm going to give a quick recap of what we did. If we can go to the next slide, please. So after establishing the values and outcomes, we conducted research and engagement to identify critical gaps in the region's reuse, recycling, and garbage system. 3 key challenges emerged: lack of access to drop-off locations, particularly in Washington County and East Multnomah County, facility limitations for waste collectors, and the need for more space and funding for reuse organizations. In late 2023, we presented 4 scenarios at a symposium that Marta mentioned, and we explored different ways Metro might be able to address these gaps. Based on feedback from project partners and Metro Council, there was strong support for the idea of a distributed model, which prioritizes smaller facilities across the region to enhance service access. Survey results also highlighted interest in supporting reuse organizations and in improving existing facilities. This approach offered multiple benefits, including expanded access to services, increased recycling rates, better handling of hazardous materials, and new opportunities for public-private partnerships. Next slide. So the draft plan that Metro has developed aims to enhance public and commercial facilities, food waste processing, and support reuse and repair organizations over the next 20 years. There are 4 key investment areas listed here: community drop-off depots, reuse and repair, organics, and commercial transfer stations. And now I'm going to describe just a little bit more about these 4 investment areas, and of course you can read more about it in the plan. Next slide. The vision for community drop-off depots is to fill gaps that were identified by residents and small businesses, including providing more locations across the region to drop off items for reuse, recycling, hazardous waste, and self-haul garbage, all in one place. These facilities will be designed for public customers driving cars and small trucks apart from commercial haulers and to be able to easily separate material for recovery and encourage waste reduction over sending more and more garbage to landfill. This is an example of a one-stop drop-off called an Eco Center in Burnaby, British Columbia, Canada. Next slide. You can see the approximate location of the 6 community depots envisioned in the plan and some of the modeling estimates for the drive times, recovery, and people to be served at these facilities as compared to the baseline today. Next slide. For reuse and repair, the plan includes investments in 2 new facilities, a reuse warehouse, and a mall. Both projects would be planned and implemented in partnership with existing reuse organizations and businesses. A third investment in this area is a sustainable reuse funding program to support businesses in recovering and diverting more materials from landfill. And the next slide. Thanks. So food represents the single largest component of the region's disposal waste stream and is a significant contributor to greenhouse gas emissions. Metro Central plays a crucial role in transferring and pre-processing food waste before it reaches an end market. This facility handles 70% of the region's food waste. In our role, it is critical to maintain a contamination-free system to produce high-quality compost and avoid environmental and health risks from microplastics. So to improve the transfer and processing capacity of organics in the region, Metro will continue to invest in Metro Central as a regional hub for receiving residential and commercial organics from haulers. Next slide, please. As part of the plan, Metro plans to develop public-private partnerships to support additional organics hubs in areas of the region where there are the greatest gaps. Next slide, please. Metro Council expressed support for repurposing over time the 2 Metro commercial transfer stations to focus on providing services that are more challenging to provide for the private sector, such as self-haul and organic transfer services. Because the plan is proposing to convert Metro South to a community drop-off depot, this would create a service gap for commercial haulers in the southern part of the region. So to fill the gap, Metro would take a phased approach to seek to authorize a new commercial transfer station or to develop a public-private partnership to build a new facility in the Clackamas County region. Next slide, please. There are 2 important areas that need more time for research, assessment, and discussion: wet waste tonnage flow and private facility regulation. The plan includes 2 actions in this area. First is to study the impact of lowering or removing Metro tonnage guarantee, including the evaluation of the current wet waste tonnage allocation program. The second is to assess options for private facility regulation to best serve the public interest. These actions are detailed more in the plan and will begin when the plan is adopted by Metro Council. Next slide, please. So this is a map that presents a visual of the facilities and the investment projects proposed in the plan. It also summarizes the overall benefits of the plan. Note that the facilities outlined with a gray circle and a dashed line on the map do not have a specific location determined yet, while the other ones are at the site where they are expected to be. Next slide. The proposed investments are estimated to cost about $273 million over a 20-year implementation period. For comparison, the original scenarios the project presented at the symposium in fall of 2023 ranged from $280 million to more than $800 million. Next slide, please. So the investments will be financed through revenue bonds with debt paid off over 20 years. The estimated increase in the garbage bill for a typical single-family household in the region over the next 2 decades is estimated to be about $1.50 to $2 per month on an average in today's dollars. This stays within what we heard people would be willing to pay for increased services after last fall's symposium. It's important to note again that this is a 20-year vision plan, and the specific costs and timing of each of the projects will be determined in Metro's annual budgeting process. The annual budget development and fee setting will be guided by the solid waste fee policy with input from the Regional Waste Advisory Committee. Next slide, please. So we included all of this information I just reviewed in the draft plan, and it's organized by chapters based on the plan phases. The heart of the plan is the investment strategy that I just reviewed the 4 key areas with you. Just wanted to lay that out, the outline. Next slide, please. We issued the draft plan for public review in October and offered a few different ways to provide input, including a survey, a public comment form on the website, along with the opportunity to submit letters or emails. Next slide, please. We also held presentations and discussions with 11 different cities on request, cities, counties, and advisory committees to review the draft plan and answer questions. Next slide, please. After we collected input from the review period, we summarized what we heard into 6 key themes and made some updates and changes to the plan based on this input. For instance, we heard that cities and counties, as well as industry and reuse businesses, wanted to continue to be involved and engaged in the infrastructure projects proposed in the plan. And we added a new page in Chapter 7 to describe how Metro expects to collaborate with partners on the planning and implementation of each project. We also heard we should start implementing projects where people lack services, and multiple local government administrators noted the existing lack of services on the east side of the metro region, in addition to the west side, and that Metro should prioritize building facilities that serve the public in these areas. The draft plan was revised to prioritize areas that lack public collection services the most. This included moving the East Multnomah County Depot planning to begin in the first phase instead of in the second phase. So that was one of the changes that we made. In addition, we heard that we should improve and promote existing facilities, which aligns with the proposed improvements to Metro South to make it more accessible and safe for residential and small business customers by eventually converting it to a community drop-off depot. Next slide, please. Council referred the plan to the newly reconstituted Regional Waste Advisory Committee to review and provide input prior to adoption. This was a request made by former Clackamas County Commissioner during the public comment period, and Metro Council agreed to do this by taking the plan to them in January and February of this year. Regional Waste Advisory Committee members provided general support for the plan, its investment strategy, and the sequence of projects proposed in Phase 1. However, there was consensus that the reuse mall needed more study and discussion before moving forward on any large investment. Staff changed the language on the reuse mall to reflect the committee's desire to study the concept more and to do a cost-benefit analysis of different models and approaches to siting and operating a reuse mall, which will be done in partnership with reuse business leaders. Next slide. So later this week, we'll be taking the plan to Metro Council to consider for adoption. If Metro Council chooses to adopt the plan, staff would begin work on the project, creating project briefs and management plans for the projects outlined in Phase 1. Project plans will be reviewed and discussed with the Regional Waste Advisory Committee and Metro Council. And as I mentioned previously, this is a 20-year vision plan, and the specific costs and timing of each project will be determined in Metro's annual budgeting process. So that is an overview for you, and love to take questions.
Great. Well, thank you. I see Commissioner Savas over there has a question.
Yeah, thanks for the presentation, and I've seen parts of this before, so I've had a chance to think over it and think of some questions. And I noticed that in your map there, you show the regional map, that, and I get it's your Metro facilities, but does Metro in this capacity direct people to some of the private facilities that are out scattered about? And the reason I ask is that it sounds like this plan for South Metro to take the commercial side and is moving it so far away that that's just more traffic, more congestion, more fuel loss and so forth to a new facility in which you're going to be spending perhaps a lot of money. And knowing that there's, something that's more, you kind of talked about the east side not really having the number of facilities. So I'm just really wondering about efficiencies, and maybe there's ways the private sector in some of the existing facilities can fill those gaps. And just wondering if you actually share that information with the public that comes in.
That's a great question. So the current system of transfer includes 6 private transfer stations and 2 public transfer stations that are distributed across the region. Metro has the ability to direct flow, but doesn't currently use that authority. We currently have an approach where we allocate waste to each of the different facilities in the region, but haulers and companies can pick whichever transfer station, whether that be Metro's, their own, or a different one, to send their waste to. If we pull commercial out of Metro South, which is what this plan proposes, there is a gap in terms of transfer, because it's really about geographic location. The haulers want the shortest distance to travel to dump their load, for it to be put into a bigger truck to be sent to its end destination. So there is a need for looking at another opportunity for private transport station in this part of the region if Metro South is left. And is there anything that you would add to that?
Yeah, I think in that section of the plan, it talks about a two-step process, and first seeing if there's an existing transfer station or facility in the Clackamas area that would want to be authorized eventually to take wet waste, and if, look at that option, and then if not, potentially work on a public-private partnership to reestablish just a commercial-focused transfer station in an industrial district.
Okay, so let's just split the commercial side a little bit. So you have the commercial wet waste stuff, and you have the commercial that is not franchise, the non-franchised commercial, let's just say construction materials where they're companies, right? Would they not be going to Metro South or going to where?
That's a great question. So there is also a nuance within that. So within construction, what we also call dry waste, which is things that come from building and construction projects, you have some instances where they are in large commercial, like giant drop boxes. That would be qualified as commercial waste. And then you have other instances where it is my brother-in-law did a construction project and he has a trailer and he's dropping off wood from the deck. So my brother-in-law's trailer would go to the depot and it would be managed in that way. And I do think some of these nuances, when we get to project refinement, would be questions that we would have to have and explore on those boundaries. But those larger commercial drop boxes would go to a commercial facility.
Okay. So what metrics drive the efficiency of these facilities? I mean, there's got to be reuse. There's got to be things like, the amount to be recycled and so forth. So how is there a place on your website that I can actually find those metrics? And in light of the construction, the dry waste in particular, I'm really hearing that there's quite a range of recycling metrics, if you will. And maybe some of the folks are doing a far better job, and maybe some of us are not doing a very good job. And it seems that, again, in guise of transportation and climate and all that, we want to reduce driving, we want to increase recycling, we want to do all these environmentally sound operations, but we ought to be pointing them to the place with the highest success. So is there a place I can find those metrics?
Well, actually, on page 79 of the plan, there are indicators and measures about what we plan to track with the implementation of this plan. So it's a waste reduction, environmental impact, driving access to public self-haul, driving access to commercial facilities, and affordability. So those are broad, but there are some stated indicators and measures that we expect to improve upon as we implement and increase accessibility in the region.
And for those are for future facilities, and for the existing system, we do produce a regional waste plan progress report every year, and there are key system indicators that are included in that are more at the system level across the region. How are we doing in terms of recovery? How are we doing in terms of reducing greenhouse gas emissions, level of reuse, living wage jobs? There's a number of different metrics included in that. We're also in the process of developing more specific metrics specifically for the Waste Prevention and Environmental Services Department, what we're calling key performance indicators, because I do believe that those metrics are incredibly important in terms of tracking accountability and performance to be able to inform investment choices. And so that is something that we've had at the broad level that we're working on diving deeper in, that we hope to have available in the next year. But as Esty mentioned, that is something that has come up in some of those conversations that when we were doing those local briefings about the importance of what measures, if you're going to develop and make these investments into new public facilities, what measures are you going to produce in terms of making sure that we're doing what we said in terms of recycling and reuse. So that will absolutely be a part of it, and I think part of the important transparency when it comes to public investments.
Yeah. Well, I'll close with this, and it's my concern. I mean, I honestly have a large property. It's not that large, but, I make a trip a year to Metro South, sometimes two, and it's getting more and more expensive, right? And it's also because of the traffic and the constraints. It's also, not my favorite place to go because I could be in line for a very long time. So I find alternatives all the time. So I might go to, McFarlane's if help my son tear down his deck. They'll take that dry waste as long as it's woody, and they'll recycle it. And it's cheaper and quicker to do it at McFarlane's than it would be, otherwise. So I just want to kind of trying to understand how Metro becomes more affordable, the Metro facilities become more affordable, and we actually help try to drive people to find the most economical and most geographic location, whether it's Metro-owned or whether it's private. So I think that we could do better in that coordination and cooperation by maybe marketing that. And if maybe someone's not doing a good job, those metrics, maybe if they're displayed and everyone's required to display those metrics, people can make a quality choice, right? So they know they're doing the most environmentally sound thing. So, thank you.
I appreciate that very much, and I think you touch on sensitivities both around fees and affordability, I think, and particularly in light of, the current landscape. I think one item to point out when we think about garbage and recycling is one of the underlying tenets is a model called pay as you throw. So the less that rates are structured at your curbside and at our public facilities, the less you put in the garbage pile, the less you pay, because it automatically incentivizes you to pull things out to either take them for recycling or donate them. And that really is a model that we want to continue to promote within these facility investments, because that is one way, right, to forward our goals of keeping valuable resources out of the landfill.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Dan.
I've never hit this button before.
You look,
I want to thank Metro. Thanks so much for making the time today. I really want to connect the dots for the board really quick because this is something we have been asking for. So fundamentally, I want a reminder for a lot of you. We go through an annual process, a rate-setting process. We run the franchise program, hauler franchise program within Clackamas County. You're all familiar with this to some degree. We, meaning Cheryl and I and our great staff at Sustainability Office and Program, will be coming forward with you. We do an independent review of those rates for our haulers. We have to make sure there's profitability for our haulers within that various discussion. What happens every year is you ask us, what are the costs that are going into these drivers that are moving this number up? And every year we tell you there are a variety of things. There are employee costs. There are costs the haulers are equipment costs the haulers are feeling specifically. But there are also external costs, and so those external costs also take the role and the partnership we have with Metro because they have the transfer facilities. If they are going to do some rate adjustments, those rate adjustments you're seeing right here, $1.50 to $2 per residential user. That's going to be an increase to our rates that we're going to have to pass on to our end user. Keep in mind, the ability to you have the personal choice to self-haul your garbage or not, or apply for whatever services you may want through our garbage and recycling services. So when you look at this discussion they're having with you, and again, we've asked for this. We've asked for give us a regional discussion around a capital plan. Because historically, we haven't had that. Historically, there's been a real discussion around, and the numbers varied. We've had 8% increases. I think we had an 11% increase one year. But there hasn't been a lot of transparency around the capital program behind that. Now you're getting this. This is the capital program that they are looking to go out and provide for the region, to provide what the regional needs as it relates to garbage and recycling services. and they've talked to you about the cost. So right now, if you look at our standard 32-gallon container at $39 approximately, $1.50 to $2, that runs about a 3 to 5% increase on that cost in 2024 dollars. And I just really wanted to kind of loop this all back together for you, because when we come forward to you and talk to you about a possible, I'm not saying we have to, but a possible adjustment to our hauling fees, these are some of the costs that go into providing that service. So again, just the opportunity to kind of connect the dots. Thanks.
I do want to make one clarification to what you said. There are differences in terms of the fees that are set by Metro. We set regional system fees.
Yes.
Local governments set curbside collection rates
Correct.
based on service levels that you determine at the county level.
Correct.
Fees that are paid at the Metro transfer stations are only paid by customers of those transfer stations. Those are not incorporated into your rates. There are regional system fees that are paid on every ton of garbage in the region that pay for grants that come to Clackamas County, household hazardous waste events that we have, the cleanup of lands, and helping meet our state waste reduction requirements. So I just want to make that clear. You're correct in that this system facilities plan would be charged to the regional system fee.
Yes.
So that would eventually get passed down into the collection fees that are established at the county level. But there are many different fees.
Oh, yeah.
And so I think and we're
I play
also,
an expert on TV, that's all.
Yeah, and we're trying to be more proactive in our outreach when it comes to fee setting, because you're not the only government that has said, why are Metro's fees increasing? Over time, we've had really static fees, and even 2 years where fees actually went down, it's been pretty consistent with the rate of inflation. It was only in the last 2 years where we saw some significant increases. And that was due to a decision that was made during COVID not to raise the fees. And that decision was the right decision at the time because we didn't understand what was ahead of us. But what happened was we went into our reserves, use those down to 30%. We do have requirements for what we have to keep in our 45-day operating reserve, which required us to move to a cost of service approach. And so those were some of the dramatic fee increases that we have seen in the 2 years to kind of make that correction from the fee pause that we had in 2020. But as we move forward, these are our decisions that need to be made in terms of what investments we want to make in regional infrastructure and public facilities, but this really has to be a plan that is between Metro and the cities and counties in the region. And there will be, again, this is a concept plan, so if council, with adoption, the next steps would be project refinement, developing a plan that has the more detailed costs, accounting for the current landscape, and then bringing that forward both to the Regional Waste Advisory Committee and in conversations and in partnership with local governments. But I will say this fee season, we're happy to come out and give a more in-depth presentation because there are a lot of complexities and nuances when it comes to the fee setting, and we'd love the opportunity to be in the room and clarify any information and provide more detail.
Great. Commissioner West.
Dr. McGuire, it's fantastic to see you.
See you.
Yeah, good to see you. That was a great explanation. I think it gets into my question a little bit, and so I appreciate that explanation. As not an expert at all in this field, and I've learned a lot since being able to be in public service, and it's one of those non-glamorous tasks that we are set with, but very, very important when it doesn't work right. I'm just very acutely aware of the overall increase for the consumer and the residential users. One thing I haven't quite seen, maybe I missed it, is there also an increase to the commercial user in fee and costs? I see like it's $1.50 to $2 a month increase to the residential user, but is there a commercial increase also?
That's a great question, and that really speaks to some of the nuances with fee setting. So Metro sets regional fees at the regional level that are charged to each ton of garbage that goes through transfer stations. So it's not deciphered based on generator. All of that waste is combined, and then it's charged on outgoing tonnage. When it comes to how that cost is passed down at the local level, that is the fee setting that you're responsible for.
Okay. My other question is overall, just trying to think about how to lower the cost to the consumer. And your key themes in 5, it was waste reduction is a priority, but also to focus on cost and affordability was number 6. And One of the things I'm curious about, and you may not have an answer to, but sometimes I feel like as we have looked at these different plans that we have a lot of nice to have options for our users, but they're not all essential, and some of those nice to have options for recycling and garbage are expensive. And one of the things I just was recently had read an article from the Boston Globe about recycling plastics and the effectiveness of this. I'm just curious how much of our plastic is actually recycled, what percentage that we take in, and is it truly recyclable, or is most of it being shipped out to third world nations and ending up in our oceans? But on a percentage basis, like, are we spending a lot of time and effort for plastics, which is super hard to recycle and expensive, and is it truly cost effective, and is it raising the cost overall?
That is a great question. I know that looking into what we call M markets, where is that plastic actually going, is a part of the state's Recycling Modernization Act, where it's actually looking at better reporting around where M markets are. So I don't have an exact answer for you around what that percentage would be. I don't know. We do have Rosalind Green, who is another staff person at Metro that has worked on this legislation that might, I don't know if there's anything to add.
Commissioners, you're out of time, and you do have another session.
And I don't know if I'll have one last thing, is it's my understanding that if it's like, let's say it's only 5% or 10% of actually plastics can be actually recycled, and then we ship them off to third world nations where they end up often in our oceans, you have to have a 30% recycle rate of an item to actually be considered recycled. At least that's what I read in the Boston Globe. And my concern is like, yeah, let's go full tilt on tin and glass and paper, cardboard, those types of things, right? But I'm wondering if we're at that point of a lack of efficiency where we need to utilize incinerators and landfills to deal with plastics where they're at, because it's just a feel good, but it's not cost effective. And overall, we're actually hurting the ratepayer and the planet at the same time. So that was my concern. If we look at rate increases, I also want to look at areas where we're not as efficient, because we are about efficiency, we're about affordability, we're about safety. Those are all keys, I believe, and themes that we also want to follow. But following your own themes there, I'm wondering, like, have we really done a deep dive in what we're offering? Is it truly effective to the ratepayer and to the environment at the same time? Or sometimes I feel like there's some reason why we push things that aren't always what's best overall if we look at the evidence before us. That's my, and thank you.
Yeah, and
Would you please sit as chair, please? Why don't
Yes.
you give up a seat, please? Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioners. For the record, my name's Rosalind Green, and I'm the Strategic Initiatives Manager at Metro. And I'm so glad you have this question, because it's critically important, and it's why Metro started tracking where our recycling went about 3 or 4 years ago, and we were the first local government that we know of that actually started tracking that. And so fast forward to today, and we have what's called the extended, or it's the Recycling Modernization Act, which is Extended Producer Responsibility Program, which is a mouthful. But we're lucky in the state to have these programs that are funded by the producers, meaning the producers of plastics and packaging are responsible for making sure they go to end markets that are responsible and not creating harm in other countries. That's a groundbreaking new law that we're leading here in Oregon with. And so we will be learning from that act, and we're excited that the state is taking that on because it's a huge global issue. And so that will be certifying end markets and where plastics go. And we would, that is an ethic that we have at Metro and will continue across all of our work.
One last thing, would Metro be willing to consider, I don't know if this is novel but it's much cheaper. I'll be honest, like I recycle and I'm careful about it. I even clean everything before I I'm very Oregonian
Love
this way.
that.
I love my
We love that.
recycling, right? However, I don't recycle plastic.
Yeah.
If it can't get me 10 cents, it goes in the garbage, and I hope you put it in the incinerator, because then it doesn't end up in my ocean.
Right.
Right? And so,
Right.
and it's cheaper. I'm feeling like, okay, cool, we spend all this money and effort to sort through this garbage. Most of it cannot actually be recycled. I believe it's mostly around the country, 5% of it can. Then often, we may not be doing this, but we're shipping it overseas to third world nations. It often ends up in a giant, horrible microplastic and a plastic island in the ocean.
Yeah.
And I just don't know if we're like, could we save people more than $2 a month on their bill if we're like, we're done with plastics, we're gonna put them in the incinerator in the landfill because it's better overall. I don't know if that's a novel idea, but
I know that part of the Recycling Modernization Act was building a standard list of what items should be recycled at the curb, and that's part of the rollout of that act, to have that consistency, because we know that there is inconsistency depending on where you live, and we should care where it ends up going. I will say in terms, plastic is such a good topic. I feel like we could dive so deeply on it. I do want to differentiate it from the system facilities plan in that those depots are really targeted on materials that we do know that there are markets for, that we do see opportunities, in particular what we call bulky waste, so large item furniture reuse, where we know that some people need curbside service where we have, or need a nearby location to drop that off. But we know that that limits the opportunity if it's sitting in inclement weather for reuse. A depot provides the opportunities for us to partner with local organizations and get that furniture to people that are just getting housing and may be in need of furniture. So these depots provide that opportunity not only for these larger items, but also for household hazardous waste, that you can't always put these materials at the curb, and it's in our best interest to make sure that they're properly disposed of, and other items that are on the state's recycling list that we know that there are responsible markets for. But you're spot on in terms of plastics. I see so many of the wishful recyclers where it's like, it's plastic, it's a clamshell, it must, it has a number on it. And there's, a lot of confusion and a lot of efforts done also on labeling because it can be very confusing.
mine just ends up in the garbage.
Sometimes, yeah.
So we're not there yet. Thank you.
Just a couple quick questions, and then Martha, if you have any, I want to definitely hear from you. And to provide some clarity on this $1.50 to $2 estimate increase to an average monthly single-family bill, which is for the capital infrastructure projects, correct? It's not for the monthly increase in bills. This is on top of that. Is that correct?
Yeah, so I think the question was, is that if it's a revenue bond and you're looking at a revenue bond of that $150 to $2 per unit or per user, is that for the capital construction plan only, or is it the capital and operation? And how are you, what's the kind of data behind the $1.50 or $2 per user?
So we did do cost modeling as a part of the system facilities plan, and if you look in the chapter on financing, there are additional details on both the capital investment as well as the operating expenses for that. The concept would be that the approach that we have proposed, as all of the project refinement and planning would be done, and a bond would not be issued until it's really shovel-ready, because we would not want to take on that debt. We have the ability to do revenue debt bonds, so we are able to spread the costs out of this infrastructure over time, but also over the residents of the region that would be using these facilities, that make the cost more manageable in terms of these larger investments. And I think it's very typical for what you do for water or other public infrastructure investments in order to make these projects happen.
Okay.
Yeah, that's an estimate over 20 years. So it depends on how quickly we can put projects into play and get approvals and, zero in on the exact amounts and package them to issue bonds, like Marta said. So that's.
And that's the capital only, right?
It is capital and some operations as well.
Oh, it is? Okay.
Yeah.
But those will be, I just want to make sure that those will be decision points. Like, we're not going to move forward with issuing a large bond or a capital investment project without making sure that we're engaging with those impacted communities, without making sure that it's going through the Regional Waste Advisory Committee, so you understand what the cost implications are for the fee. And one of the conversations that we're having, we'll be beginning with our council and the Regional Waste Advisory Committee that is overseeing the plan development, is looking at different types of fee models, such as a stability and investment model that are used in other jurisdictions like Seattle Public Utilities and King County, where they set a threshold. There is a limit in terms of fee increases over a 3 to 5 year period. So cities and counties and service providers can really plan for what that looks like. And then there's choices to be made. If you know that you have this debt service payment that is going to take up this much of that fee, then you have to make some choices around other programs. That, I think, will also help get to the predictability that we have heard from cities and counties to better understand. We don't want these erratic increases. We really want to understand what those fee increases
Right.
will be over time. And
Right, and I think our concern, which has kind of been expressed, seniors on fixed income.
Yeah,
each and
absolutely.
every time these increases go, it does have an impact on all. And a couple quick questions, one of which is, I know in a particular city in the state of Washington, they actually have a free garbage day, and particularly some people that can't afford it, it's that one day a year that they look at. I know that's a big ask, but as far as somebody who really believes in the broken window theory about keeping our communities clean, we have a lot of volunteer groups that go out on their own. And if there was a way in any of this planning process that there could be a particular day where people are donating their time, money, and effort, if there was a way to also allow them to make this get rid of their garbage at no cost, at least maybe a certain time of the year, or discounts for the county that goes out and does that, because it's, as you can see in Multnomah County and other areas, it is a big issue. And those costs are oftentimes pushed back onto counties and cities, so it's about all of us kind of working together. So just ask you to kind of consider that. And with that, I kind of want to turn over to Martha. Did you have any comment?
No, I think it's a great report. Thank you for it.
I do want to share just one response into the idea of a free trash day. We do have a regional refresh program. It's the Regional Refresh Fund that local governments and communities and businesses can apply to set up exactly what you're saying. It's a low barrier program where you submit an application and we can fund exactly that. And so I know Clackamas County has been awarded some grants in the past year, but there's also increased opportunity for us to get that, to work with your staff to get that out into the community, because that's something that it is a resource available today. And I would also add that there are other jurisdictions like Washington County that have adopted low-income rate assistance programs that do provide that relief for communities that are on fixed, individuals that are on fixed incomes. And so they have spent some time putting that program in place.
Fantastic. Well, thank you. Not seeing any other questions, so we sure appreciate your time.
Thank you so much.
And turning to Gary, do we have anything else?
That's it for today. You all have appointments offline, so.
All right. Well, with that being said, we will be adjourned, and thank you very much.